V Rising is a game that I got a few weeks prior to this review. I saw an interview with the game devs talking passionately about their open world survival game that they had created, and combined with the gothic style aesthetic where you get to play as a vampire, I was sold. In a span of around 1 to 2 weeks, I put 65 hours of playtime into this game, which probably speaks for itself when it comes to me enjoying the game. So first off, let me tell you this. V Rising, at the current price of $19.99 on the Steam store, is absolutely worth buying. Although the game is in early access right now, the amount of polish the game already has is baffling to me. I've yet to encounter any graphical issues, game-breaking bugs, or any other technical annoyances in the game. So if you're just looking for a reason to buy this game, here it is. The game's polished, the gameplay is satisfying and fun, and it keeps you engaged in its content as a whole. However, as it is with most freshly developed games, V Rising is far from perfect. There were multiple instances in the game where I was just scratching my head as to what the game devs were thinking with some of the content and mechanics of the game, and to be honest, this is kind of the reason why I'm making this video in the first place. I'm not trying to take a dump on the game because, as I said, I think the game's already an A-tier game, but if the devs were to change and or elaborate on some of the issues that I have with V Rising, it could very well become S-tier. So what exactly is V Rising? Well, as of right now, I'm having difficulties making a comparison, since I've never played a game quite like this. V Rising is essentially an open-world survival game taking place during a time where vampires have been vanquished by the human population. Now, this is where you as the player come in, since you're being resurrected as a vampire yourself to usher in a new age of the vampires. The focus on the game lies mainly on its combat against either in-game bosses and NPCs, or against other players who also play as vampires. Since I've been playing on a PvE server, for my playthrough, this review is going to be mainly focused on that. Although I will make a few comments about the PvP experience as well, since this is, in my opinion, how the game was meant to be played in the first place. Furthermore, before you buy the game, you probably want to play this game with at least one other friend, not only because playing co-op should be more fun just by default, but also because there are actual benefits in-game by having a fellow vampire assist you on your journey. At the beginning of the game, you'll see the intro cinematic and proceed to get resurrected as a brand new vampire. You then stumble through the introduction area as the game tells you how combat works, as well as introducing you to the crafting system. Now, this is already where I had my first oh no moment in the game. The game asks you to craft a potion to heal yourself, as well as your initial armor set and weapons. So far so good, right? Well, turns out V Rising is one of those games that make you wait while crafting something. When I crafted my first item, the game made me wait an entire 10 seconds. Maybe some of you think that I'm being nitpicky here, but this was kind of a bad omen for the rest of the game in my opinion at the time, and it turned out I was right, which I'll get to in a second. Once you're done with the tutorial area, you'll be sent out into the open world, where you are essentially free to do as you like. Now, even though this is an open world game, there is still a fairly linear progression line in the game, since you're lacking a lot of essential equipment and character strength to actually do as you wish. For example, you can at this point explore the entire map if you wanted to, but you're going to run into all sorts of enemies that are just going to effectively one-shot you if you're not careful. Right from the start, the game provides you with a sort of quest system, which will act as your overall guideline through the entirety of your playthrough. Should you not know what to do at any given point during your journey, you can and have to complete these quests in order to progress in the game, since there is a variety of items and recipes locked behind it. Now, the arguably biggest part of the game is building your own base, which in this case manifests as a gothic-style vampire castle. You're being told to farm resources around the world, such as cutting trees and breaking stones or gathering some sort of ore to craft armor, weaponry, and your castle itself, and this is where I come back to my initial problem with the game. Crafting. In order to build most structures in your castle, you need to farm resources and then put them into, for example, a sawmill or a grinder so that you can transform said resources to more valuable ones. The issue here is that not only do you need a lot of resources at some points in the game, which makes it rather grindy, you also need to wait for, in my opinion, a huge amount of time in order for those primary resources that you just gathered to be transformed into those resources that you actually can do something with. For example, if you go out and farm materials to craft scourge stones, a material that you'll find using yourself all the time, especially during endgame, you'll now have to put those materials into a furnace and wait for 2 minutes in order to craft 1 scourge stone. This is insane in my opinion, and the only reason why this is tolerable at all is because the game gives you stuff to do while processing the primary resources that you just farmed, such as killing bosses, interacting with other players, or farming even more resources in the meantime. At first this doesn't seem too bad, but the time spent gathering resources combined with the additional wait for your resources to get processed just feels like the game is wasting my time a bit more than it actually should. This becomes worse during endgame as well. So now you've built your first castle. What's next? Well, the game will ask you to build a blood altar, which is the second main system in the game. The blood altar shows you a few bosses in the area that you could potentially hunt down by tracking their scent of blood. I think this is a pretty cool system to engage into PvE content, and it does give you a reward for every single boss that you kill, such as a new spell for your character to use and or a few new recipes to craft stuff. Once the blood altar is introduced, you will now find yourself in the main gameplay loop of V-Rising. Farming resources, refining them into whatever you want in order to improve your castle and gear, and then going on hunts for bosses while those resources are taking their sweet time to be refined. The issue with this loop is that sometimes you will run into a bit of downtime, since resources are always needed, but you're not going to always have a boss to hunt down, since your level might not be appropriate yet to actually tackle a new challenge. At this point, I wish the game would provide me with some sort of side quest that I can do that would ideally give me both resources to refine, as well as potential gear upgrades to close the gap in power between you and the next boss that you need to hunt down. Otherwise, you'll find yourself waiting inside your castle for your material to finish refining, while not really having anything else to do, which is not a good feeling. Combat in V-Rising feels fairly decent and engaging, except for a certain lack of variety when it comes to the actual spells that you get after killing bosses. I don't really have a real bone to pick when it comes to the abilities, however, it is unfortunate that it usually comes down to, hey, here's a new projectile you can shoot. It's kind of the same as the other spell you already had, but slightly different. Again, I'm fine with the combat that the game provides, but it could use a little more variety. The weapons you can acquire in the game give you certain attacks and skills depending on what weapons you use, and those actually feel fleshed out as every weapon and its skill set are fairly unique. What's more is that when it comes to bosses, the game has the same old issue as most other games with boss encounters, where instead of raising the difficulty by giving the boss more challenging mechanics, it just throws a ton of ads at you to keep you on your toes. This is lazy game design in my opinion, but it is tolerable as a good chunk of V-Rising's boss encounters don't actually do this. When it comes to the transformation abilities, however, the game leaves me extremely disappointed. See, in V-Rising you can get a handful of different animal forms you can transform into. The wolf, the bear, the frog, the rat, the bat, and the human form. The wolf is the first one you get after killing the first boss in the game, and it acts as your travel form as it provides you with a decent speed boost while running around the world. Unfortunately, as you progress in the game, you'll find yourself using only the wolf form to travel, the human form for stealth and trade with NPCs, and the rat for additional stealth as well. The bear form makes you a bit more buff and is meant for destruction of environmental barricades, which I only used once in the entire game so far. The bat form has the issue of being pretty useful as it lets you fly over the map without needing to worry about following a certain path to get to your destination. However, the fact that it is unlocked right before the end of the game also makes it kind of obsolete. The frog form, however, is the worst one out of all the aforementioned animal forms. With my 65 hours of playtime, I have yet to find a use for this transformation. It basically lets you jump pretty high, which is meant to let you across certain obstacles without having to destroy them or simply traversing terrain. Problem is, the only time I saw a ledge that I wanted to get up to was to get to a cave entrance, which would have let me travel across the map without needing to use a vampire gate, your usual method of fast travel in the game. However, it didn't let me. For some messed up reason, the game showed me a ledge that I could potentially jump up to in order to cleverly use the fast travel method of the cave systems in the game, and yet I was left baffled by the game not allowing me to do so. At this stage, I don't really understand the point of having the frog form at all. This kind of unfruitful foreshadowing happens again with the bat form. There's an area in the game that you can't enter by normal means, as every entrance to it is blocked by huge boulders. Now, being the good gamer boy that I am, I thought to myself, hey, I'm surely meant to use the bat form here, as that would be the only logical method of actually getting in there, which at the time was brilliant game design to me, as it gave me a reason to look forward to the new transformation I would acquire at a later point in the game. This wasn't the case though. First thing I did after getting the bat form was flying to that inaccessible place to get in, and yet again, the game didn't let me. This seems to be a reoccurring flaw in the game. It gives or shows you something cool that you can look forward to, and then it lets you down by not actually giving you the chance of using the new cool thing that you just got. Finally, we have the worst system in the game, RNG. In order to progress through the game, you need to unlock as many recipes as possible in order to be able to craft the stuff that you need. Most of those recipes are usually cosmetic items, such as furniture and decorations for your castle. Some of them are items that would come in handy during a difficult boss fight or PvP situation, such as potions, and some of those items are actual gear and weapon upgrades. In order to unlock those recipes, you need to farm either paper, scrolls, or schematics depending on where you currently are in the game, and then use those as a sort of currency to randomly unlock recipes at the appropriate workstation. Paper is for early game, scrolls for mid game, and schematics for end game. Now, the fact that you unlock a random recipe after using your scrolls is not terrible in and of itself, as long as farming the paper, scrolls, or schematics can be done in a fairly effective way. This is not really the case, however. You have two possibilities to get your hands on that currency you need to unlock recipes. You either farm them out while pillaging the different villages on the map, or you get really lucky and unlock the paper press early on. The paper press allows you to actually craft the currency that you need in order to unlock recipes. However, the paper press itself is locked behind that very system of RNG. So if you're as unlucky as I am, you will unlock the paper press at the very end of the game, making it pretty obsolete and forcing you to continuously waste your time farming out random villages on the map to get paper. And let me tell you, farming the same village over and over and over again because you're trying to unlock a recipe that would give you a gear upgrade only to receive another piece of furniture that you're not going to need is infuriating. The game at this point was wasting my time and didn't care about it. I spent hours to get my final gear upgrades, and the act of doing so was just not enjoyable whatsoever. This is actually the reason why I haven't killed the last two bosses in the game. I need 1 or 2 more upgrades for my gear in order to stand a chance against those bosses, and yet I find myself just playing something else to avoid farming those godforsaken schematics for hours without end. This is effectively my biggest issue with the game. During endgame, it just keeps wasting your time to artificially extend the amount of time you spend playing the game, and it feels wrong. It feels dirty, and it is the #1 thing I want to see being changed in the future. Again, after shitting on the game for who knows how long now, I want to remind everyone that V-Rising is a good game. Especially since it's in early access, and with the low price of $19.99, you should absolutely give it a try and see whether you like it or not for yourself. Apart from the endgame, I had tons of fun. The game does a lot of stuff right, and especially if you play together with a friend, the game becomes worth its money. Alright, that's all for me. I hope this was helpful to you guys, and I'll see you in the next video.